All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm very blessed to be the featured speaker in the Jewish year. It's rapidly coming to a close. So technically, according to the Jewish calendar, I'm the last webinar speaker of this year. However, we're actually just begun really our webinar series for this semester. And my colleague, Jim, and you've heard from Joshua and various other members of our team. I'll put up a quick slide in just a moment so you get to see who we are face to face, even though we aren't able to be face to face for this particular meeting. But I will be responsive to chats. So I'll try and look out for comments that come in as we go, and I will stop. I intend to stop about halfway through or 2/3 of the way through so we can take some questions. And then, of course, there will be time for questions at the end. I wanted to take a somewhat of a lighthearted approach. It's, again, like I mentioned, the Jewish calendar can be somewhat of a heavy time or a busy time preparing for the holidays. So I wanted to keep this relatively light, but obviously have some important take-homes too. So I want to, again, thank everyone for joining, who is joining us live. And also, thank everyone who is listening to this as we are going to live on our Career Center our Career Center has a lecture series on the homepage of YouTube, of Yeshiva University's YouTube page, and I will refer to that later on. So let's dive in. This is entitled Resume and Interview Bloopers. I'm going to also refer to cover letters because in practice or in real life, when we talk about preparation for getting our materials ready for jobs, that includes can include various different application materials, of which the most common are resume and cover letter. That wouldn't all fit in the nice convenient title, so I just put resume and interview bloopers. And that's who I am at the bottom there, Daniel Coleman. And let me move on to the next slide. As mentioned, here is my wonderful team. There is one person, my colleague Jim, who's missing. He should be right here in the void next to me on the back row. He actually joined our team a couple of months after this photo was taken, right before the COVID era. I think day 2 or day 3 of his employment, we were all told that we would be forever, well, not forever, but I guess for the foreseeable future, hopefully not forever, working remotely. And so we're fortunate to have got to know him online, and I hope that over the course of time you will get to know myself and Jim and the various other members of our team, both remotely and hopefully before not too long in person. As you can see in my background, I should just a quick note as you see me on the screen. I have, of course, San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge in the background, and that's in solidarity. My thoughts and prayers are with them, and the air quality across the West Coast, with or without masks, I'm told it's really, people are really suffering there, and my thoughts and our prayers go out to them. So, just a quick few words about the Career Center mission. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we want people to be somewhat familiarize themselves with it. We are working with a diverse student body. I happen to do a lot of work myself with the graduate students, especially in the CAT school, also with Wurzweiler, and with a MBA program in SIMS as well, and their masters in accounting and so on. So we are diverse both in terms of who we serve and what they're studying, and also the diverse student body, Jewish students, students from all different other faith traditions and none. And Yeshiva University is really a hub for a lot of specialties. So we're excited that we continue to diversify. I think another time I can speak more towards that, but for the sake of time, let's jump into the next one. We want students to think strategically. These highlights, these pieces in bold are my own, just partly a prompt to me and also to those that are following along. We want people to think strategically and not just to, let's say, apply to 100 jobs because that's what they think they need to do, but to really think strategically about what is the best approach, for example, for their jobs, for careers, and so on. So we help people think strategically at all steps of their career and career preparedness. We also use evidence-based practices, and again, something to speak about another time. There's something called the NACE competencies. NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, to which all the Career Center employees belong. one of the primary associations. There are others too, but all of us are members in at least one professional association, which exchanges evidence-based practices, does research in the field to think about and to consider and then demarcate what exactly a quality service is and how we make that replicable and standardized. So regardless of who you are, whether you might come into YU with 100 different contacts, maybe you know all the professors already, or you have someone on the board of trustees, regardless of who you are, where you come from, we're here to support you and give you that same quality of service. And the last part here is really important because we also do a lot of work with alumni. We don't close our doors to you after graduation and say, no more, you have to go elsewhere for career services. No, we are with you for life, and we do a lot of work with career changes or people that are switching and transitioning from one job to another. And we invite our alumni back, and we want them to stay engaged, and many, and we're proud to say perhaps most, in some way or another do support us and support our students in giving of their wisdom and advice. You may have heard, if you're an undergraduate, you may have heard of YU MVP, which we are rolling out kind of as we speak, suddenly over the last 6 months or so. And that's one of the forums, there are many others, of alumni engagement. Okay, so let's dive in with our objectives for this evening. We want to discover some easy ways to sabotage your job search and interview process. Of course, we don't want you to sabotage it. We want you to learn from perhaps the ways that other people have done this in order to, for us to learn what not to do. And objective number 2, second bullet, tips for preparing key application material. So along the way, we'll be discussing sort of the converse in terms of learning from what you shouldn't do to what you actually should do. And we want to have a little bit of fun as well. And so that is one of certainly my goals for tonight. And I had fun making the slides and look forward to engaging with you both tonight and beyond tonight. So let's go straight to some resume basics. There is we do have a website where if you're curious, on our homepage, we have under quick links, we have, let me actually show it to you now. If I just escape my screen for a moment, I will spend just a quick moment pointing out that we have a Canvas page where we have a lot of resume samples, and we also have a resume guide or resume tip sheet, which has everything you need to know to get started with resumes. And let me show you that just one quick second, because I have it up here. So if I stop screen sharing and I go out of my presentation, I can actually show you exactly where that is. Give me one moment, and let's see. Okay, so let me share my new screen. Just one moment. And here we go, share screen, and you are gonna see. Okay, so you should be able to see this. This is our Canvas page. So for those of you that are enrolled in YU, I recognize not everyone necessarily on the call is from YU. However, for those that are enrolled in YU, you will be able to find us on the Canvas page, or you could actually type in, I'll put the, at the top if you're watching me, bit.ly/YU in uppercase, and then Canvas in lowercase, and that will take you to exactly the same page, bit.ly/YU Canvas will take you to this. Then you can enroll if you haven't already. I've already enrolled, so I can just go to my course, and then I will see a lot of fun stuff, including over here under modules, a whole entire resume module. So we've got some resume guides for you. We've got some resume samples. And for tonight, I will be using this. Again, you can also find this, if you're not from YU, under quick links on the homepage of our website. However, for tonight, let me open this very briefly so you see a good sample of what we're talking about when we talk about resumes. And this is trying to open up FlipSnag. Let's do this. Okay, so here is a good example. You've got the contact information, you've got education section, work experience. I know it might be a little bit small. Don't worry too much about that, but these top 3 are really essential. Your contact information, your education section, certainly when you're a student, and your work experience in that order are really important. And as you'll see, this is a pretty straightforward, there's no particular frills. The color on the page, so you might see the blue is really our own comments. As you can see on the side, we've made some convenient comments. There's a few more pages. I won't go through the rest necessarily, but you can see actually a nice pointer here. Be sure to have an appropriate voicemail set, right? So if you're already providing a phone number, make sure it's professional. Not that, you know, we pick up the phone or someone calls you and you've got a, what do you call it, a funny voicemail, like, this is Donald Trump speaking, please leave me a message, something of that nature. We would not be excited as career professionals if you have that, because that will, it might be funny right now, but if a professional is trying to get hold of you, they may, regardless of their political views, they want to reach, in this case, Sam Cooke rather than Donald Trump. So again, look at our tips. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I just wanted to give you a sense right off the bat of what it looks like. And I am going to go back to our regularly scheduled presentation. And so if you just give me one moment, I'm going to go back to resume where we were. And here we are. Okay, so we are back. Hopefully you can all see this. And again, when it comes to, we mentioned about voicemails, when it comes to emails, don't have DannyBoy4281999 at Hotmail, right? Have something a little bit more professional. People don't necessarily need to know your date of birth. In fact, we would recommend not putting that on a resume. It might be seen in some European resumes. Don't put a picture on the resume. I put that later down the slide as well. So if you don't yet have a professional one, use your YU email for those that are enrolled here, or get a new professional email which doesn't have too many numbers in, which might get confusing. And like we saw again, you put the education section, the experience section, keep it to one page, and there are exceptions to this, but as a general rule, keep it to one page. And ABC, if anyone want to guess, they can put something in the chat if you would like, if you want to guess what ABC is, as I move to my next slide. Okay, so I think we had one person in the chat who guessed it. ABC, always, or almost guessed it, always be consistent. Okay, so keep equal spacing between paragraphs. If you're bolding a company name, keep that consistent throughout, and so on. So you don't want your work to appear sloppy before you even start, you know, when you send in the resume, because then they might wonder, well, how is this person going to perform on the job if they can't even, you know, keep things consistent in their resume. Here are a couple of optional sections. I crossed out objective because for the most part, you should not have that. That would be in the blooper category, because in general, if you're writing something like, I would like to work for your company, or we see different variations of that, I would kind of say, well, yes, of course. Otherwise, why would you bother sending a resume to me if you're, you know, what else is your objective in that regard? So don't put something that's kind of blatantly obvious and take precious real estate in your resume to put that on. A summary section can be appropriate. Perhaps if there's time, we will talk about that later. You may want to put coursework, especially relevant coursework to the type of position or industry you're applying to, honors and awards, skills, languages, activities and interests. These are all optional, and some of this is really good to put on, especially if you do have awards. That's really nice to show people. If it's an award from 10 years ago, it may not be relevant, and you probably don't want to put that on because it might indicate that you haven't really done too much or haven't been awarded very much in the last 10 years or so. So it could get the recruiter or the hiring manager kind of scratching their head. Okay, well, that's nice. They got that award when they were, you know, 12 years old or whatever it might be, but what have they done recently? So generally, you really want to focus on things that are more recent. And that gives us a good entree into the next one. Here are some fun sayings from some real resumes that we at the Career Center have come across. And I entitled this slide, Sweat the Small Stuff, right? Maybe at home, that's not the best way to go. You might want to let things slide. There are occasions not to sweat the small stuff, but the resume is suddenly the occasion to make sure you're paying attention and get it proofread. So here we go. Firstly, if you did write an objective and you put something like this, seeking party-time position with room for advancement. Obviously, maybe if you're going into the entertainment industry, that might be suitable, but otherwise you want to make sure you're looking at part-time rather than party-time positions with an extra room to hold the party in that you suddenly do not want to convey. So that's blooper number one. Another one, easy blooper, detail-oriented. Well, I kind of read it as detail, and that's, you know, I suddenly get the sense of what they're trying to convey. but they have not spelled detail correctly. And that, again, would leave me feeling very skeptical about whether this person really is detail-oriented if they didn't even proofread or have someone perhaps review their resume, be that a career professional, which we're happy to do at the Career Center to work with you to create resumes, or perhaps even a family member or a friend or a roommate and so on. Next one, I'm a perfectionist and rarely, if ever, forget details. So that's one which we actually catch quite a bit in the Career Center. Just people have these extra words. This again is something perhaps the sentence is more out of a cover letter. And that is what I would recommend to just again to proofread. I'm not going to go into the next bullets, but you can imagine that if you leave out the F in shift supervisor, it reads something very different. So I would encourage you to, again, spell check. And when we talked about awards a moment ago, so let me just go back a slide just for a second, received a plague for Salesperson of the Year. That's very unfortunate because we are faced as a world population with a plague right now. I think we've all had more than our fair share of plagues for this lifetime. And I really don't want anyone working for me that has plagues or might bring in more plagues into my work environment. So again, it's a kind of an honest mistake, if you like. It's but one which could have easily been avoided. The last one is actually from a resume that I reviewed about a year ago. And as I mentioned, we have a large population, growing population from Asia and from overseas. We also have some from Russia as well. But this particular one was from an Asian student who had pride of place in her award section on her resume. She had listed a prize that as part of her Communist Youth League. And I had to explain to her that this would not be appropriate for a sort of a standard American resume. We would, the standard American recruiter or US recruiter, while this might be a big accolade back in China, in your home country, you have to understand some of the cultural nuances. So again, just like there are style differences from country to country, any international students that are watching this, and I myself was in that category 20 years ago and had to do a lot of work on my resume, several trips to the Career Center to be able to get it into a format that was really acceptable for US audience. And this is another thing which I would sort of lump in together with that there's, sometimes it's the wording or even the things that we've been involved with may or may not be appropriate. So find someone that can be a good and honest guide to you to edit out those kind of potential bloopers. And by the way, a big shame because our award section was towards the end of the resume. Resume was really stellar for the most part, but then at the end of it, I'm seeing Communist Youth League. I'm trying to, and I had to explain to her, if I was a recruiter, you would have lost me with that kind of sort of penultimate or the last few lines there with that mention. Okay, so let me, let's talk a little bit about just one or two more. Led day-to-day execution of 15 people and their associated work. I am sure that they did not mean execution, perhaps executed daily tasks and so on. There is room to put, to use a strong word. And actually the word executed is a strong word. We encourage people to use strong action verbs. And in fact, I showed you the, again, under quick links on the homepage of our website or on our Canvas page, you will see on the sample resumes, you will see on our resume guide that the last page of the resume guide is an entire page full of great action verbs. We encourage people to use very active ones, not sort of more passive one, like I helped, or I worked, or I assisted. Like, okay, but tell me a little bit more. What did you actually do? And, help is very passive. I want you to take an active voice. And so those words, words such as, executed, and in the next one we see dispensed and so on. Those are good, strong words. But you also need to make sure they are used appropriately and that the phrase is grammatically appropriate. The next one, again, like I mentioned, dispensed medication and passed out. So again, we kind of understand he or she was probably in a nursing type of environment. We have many students that do work actually for group homes and so on. And they may have written something along this line. So just, be conscious of how that reads. We have a wonderful writing center as well. You can look up their hours and they are we work collaboratively with them. And suddenly, whether you're an international student, whether you're a domestic student, and you want another set of eyes on the materials that you are preparing to deliver, preparing to, I was going to say preparing to pass out, preparing to disseminate, shall we say, for job applications, do take that extra help. We're here to help. The Writing Center is here to help, and there are many other resources out there that can help with that too. Under skills, I've put a few together that, again, to emphasize or re-emphasize some of the things we've been mentioning. Rabid typist, that probably isn't exactly what they meant. They probably meant rapid typist. Having a word count would probably help. And we'll talk about sort of numbers and data in another minute or so. Because otherwise I could say I'm a rapid typist, but that doesn't necessarily, your idea of a rapid typist is not necessarily the same idea as my idea of a rapid typist. So you may want to qualify that. Bilingual in 3 languages. So, for those that have a tricycle or may have had that, they would probably know that tri or triangle is really what you want. In this case, trilingual in 3 languages. In general, don't put English as a language. Employers are going to assume that you speak English, especially if you're writing the resume in English. It should be well written. If you want to say, bilingual because you speak, let's say, bilingual in English and Dutch, so that is perfectly acceptable. But if you're just trying to show the world that, that you speak English, that's kind of a waste of space. It should be sort of self-evident by and large. The last one is just, or the last bullet here, exposure to German for 2 years, but many words are inappropriate for business. I'm not sure exactly, it kind of comes off the wrong way. What I would say though is, and this is to the last line here, when people put on their resumes basic, especially when I see the word basic several times, to me, if I was a hiring manager, I would be a little bit concerned. I'd say, well, okay, well, especially if you think this is important enough to put on your resume, why didn't you give it enough importance to actually take it to a slightly higher level? Now, again, for freshman students, people that are just starting out, it could be okay to have basic there, perhaps once or twice if you want to talk about your level of proficiency. But I would certainly say if you have basic, more than once, you really want to sort of question, do you even need it? Certainly for, Hebrew, Hebrew is great. Spanish, perhaps in today's world, unless you're working for an Israeli company, is even more important. Chinese, Mandarin would certainly be right up there as well. When I was in a hiring position before I came to YO, I did quite a bit of hiring in my previous role. At one point, I was certainly looking for a Spanish speaker to round out my team. And if someone had on their resume sort of Spanish basic, I would be like, well, okay, that's going to the bottom of my pile, because I want someone who at the minimum could sort of welcome clients or liaise with people, and basic really doesn't cut it for me. I need someone who can really at a minimum be conversational. So again, think about languages aren't bad to put on, but you don't want to come off as someone who's really just at a basic level. Okay, I'm going to pause after our next slide because I've been speaking a lot. So feel free, if you already have questions, to drop those in the chat, and then I will I've put these 5 little stars at the bottom of my slide just to remind myself that I want to take a quick pause, if nothing else, for a sip of water. But meantime, we mentioned data before, as in the type, the speed with which you type. That's one way to add data to a resume. You really want to look for opportunities to put I'd say more than facts, figures, data, especially the last thing I want to see is someone, let's say, applying for actuarial science or data science or computer science or mathematics, who really doesn't have any numbers in their resume. To me, that would be like, wait, so you've studied mathematics for X amount of years and yet you don't have any numbers. Like, can this guy actually add up, right? I would be a little bit worried. So definitely put numbers as much as you can, and think about that actively in terms of when you're pursuing internships and jobs. Think about, what can I even keep a record of, so that when I go back or when I'm updating my resume, I can actually make sure I have sort of the data to hand. So here's a few kind of funny ones. Graduated in the top 70% of class. Okay, good. So probably they maybe just made the cut before, I guess, the F grade or something like that. So again, If you're in the top 7%, that might be a little bit different, and perhaps the person even meant that, but they made a typo. Again, usually if you got like third or fourth prize, going back to our awards section, you probably want to say it might not be all that valuable. Like if you got third prize out of 10 people, like, okay, right? If you got third prize out of 300 people, then that suddenly, you know, I think that gives people a broader picture of your achievements. Once you got fourth or fifth place, you probably don't want to necessarily even list that as an award. Again, unless you can qualify and say there were like 100 people there. But if you got sort of fourth place out of a regular size class, then maybe there's, you know, at YU, we pride ourselves on small class sizes, maybe just, you know, 15, 17 people. So perhaps fourth place or fifth place isn't quite as impressive. Achievements. So someone put under their achievements planned a new corporate facility. There's obviously an alumni, someone with quite sizable experience. They planned a new corporate facility at 3 million over budget. They probably didn't exactly mean to say that. They probably meant to say 3 million perhaps within the budget or something of that nature. But this comes in as perhaps they weren't very good at planning, or they wildly overspent, or something of that nature. And that does not reflect well on this particular candidate. The next one, completed 11 years of high school. What they probably meant there was completed high school, I think would be just as important. You could put high school becomes far less important in general after your freshman year. It's already, for those that have spent a year or two, a gap year, a year in yeshiva or elsewhere, high school by the time you come to YU is already kind of getting old news again for your freshman year. And certainly if you won some significant awards, you can keep it on your resume, but beyond your sort of freshman, sophomore year, we would not, or should I say your first year at YU, be that as a freshman, be that as a sophomore, we would not encourage you to put high school. Would really focus on, you know, your university experience and so on, and your college experience. Same thing, last bullet point here, instrumental for ruining entire operation for a Midwest chain store. They probably didn't mean ruining, they probably meant something like running. And with that, I'm going to take a very brief pause, and just to ensure that if there are any questions, I'm going to take a quick look at the chat right now, and you can feel free to put questions in there. If you don't have any questions, that's fine. It gives me 10 seconds to have some water, and then we will continue to the to the second half of the presentation. All right, thank you for staying with me. We are going to go straight into our second part. So we talked about at the end of the resume, you may have space, both space or desire to put on interests, and this shows that you are perhaps more of a well-rounded person. So a couple of notes of caution. This person actually did quite well. They took her advice and they put donating blood as an interest. Perhaps beyond donating blood, if you organize blood drives, that would be great. Again, organizing blood drives, if you just did 2, I guess you could leave it as organizing blood drives. But certainly if you organize several of them, you know, put the number in. Organized 4 blood drives, collecting 300 or total of 300 plus gallons of blood or something of that nature. I think that's fine. When you put interest donating blood, 14 gallons so far, that could be considered like by some, I don't want to say grotesque or so. I work myself in the healthcare industry, so I certainly don't faint at the sight of blood. But others may think that may be a little too much. So just, you know, that's not a blooper per se, but, you know, just consider and show it again to 1 or 2 people and see what they think. Enjoy cooking Chinese and Italians. Again, I think be a little cautious. They probably meant, obviously, I guess, cooking Italian style food or recipes and so on, which is fine. Cooking is great. And by the way, I would say very much as an asset to those that are, well, I would say like this. First, I'll address the females, then the males. I had a student recently that under her interest, she had kickboxing. And I think in the world that's, I'll certainly speak for myself, in the world that I grew up in, perhaps a more conservative British environment, the idea is suddenly going back, you know, a couple of decades that women would be doing and young women would be doing kickboxing is sort of very unusual and out of the box. So it was very refreshing to see that for me. And I think that recruiters and those that see her resume, I think that really gives like a non-traditional interest, which makes people see, hey, this person like has something unique to offer. Right? And I don't want them to start, necessarily kickboxing club in my work. Maybe I do. Maybe we need an outlet, and that's great too. But it tells me this person is more than sort of the sum of her parts, and more than just good, hopefully academically and so on. But she's has some broad interests as well. Whereas, as you can see, the next one, reading. That actually doesn't tell me too much, right? It's sort of, well, okay, congratulations. You made it through first grade or second grade and you can read. I have to read every day. I do it for work. I do it for pleasure, but I don't necessarily consider that as one of my greatest interests. It's sort of part of my life and a big part of my life, and to an extent, sort of depends what I'm reading, perhaps a meaningful part. But I would, if it's something very specific, like you read a certain type, especially let's say someone's going for medical school and they read a very specific industry related, let's say the Lancet or the British Medical Journal, and they've been subscribing for the last 5 years, let's say, and they're an avid consumer of research in the industry, so that could potentially add an angle. But or they read a certain genre, perhaps. So you could qualify that, but I would generally choose something that is ideally at least one of your interests should be in the context of a group, so that you kind of also portray you being a team player. That should be portrayed elsewhere in your resume, not waiting till the end at the interest section, but suddenly if all your interests are solo, let's say, I don't know, hiking, which could be done in both, but I don't know, hiking, origami, and reading, those would all indicate to me that this person perhaps has a very private, is a private person, private life, and that can be okay. But if I want someone perhaps that's more outgoing, or is more of a team player, I may accidentally have sabotaged myself by putting those more, if you like, introverted or more personal interests at the end. And the last line, I feel compelled to say it because we're under Yeshiva University and Modern Orthodox establishment, and we do have many students, quite rightly, who are very proud of much of their communal involvement, including things like challah baking fundraisers, Chai Lifeline, Tomchei Shabbos. Notice the use again of and these are just examples, of course. Now, these things are great, but bear in mind that most of you at some point in your life are going to be applying for positions beyond sort of the YU wall, beyond the Jewish community, and the challah may or may not be known, a known word. Chai may or may not be known. Tomchei will probably not be known. Many Jews may not even necessarily understand that. And you don't, on the one hand, we want, we are proud of our Judaism for those that identify as Jewish, and certainly addressing our, that will be 100% essentially of our undergraduate audience. But at the same time, know that your bosses may or may not be, or future boss may or may not be religious. If you organize something like Tomchei Shabbos, you want to expand on it, perhaps like a food distribution or food pantry program. Chai Lifeline, the same thing. You want to expand a little bit. And challah baking, again, so you want to think about how do I portray this in a way that shows that I'm sensitive to a broader audience, and I can work with an audience that isn't just comprised of other Orthodox Jews. And my last note, I know I've spent a lot of time in this slide, so before we retire this slide, is that diversity is really important. It's not just a buzzword, but it is something that is really taken very seriously in industry. There's research that when firms are successful in diversifying, they actually are more productive, and it affects the bottom line. And if you restrict your interests and show that all your interests are really just within the Jewish community, that doesn't obviously sort of fit the perhaps many employers' desire to sort of diversify or have new employees that are, they may be concerned that you're not as sensitive to diversity around yourselves as well. So just again, something to consider when listing interests in specific areas. Okay, so here we are, a couple of cover letter bloopers. I promised to put a little bit more about cover letters. I'm looking for a salary commensurate with my experience. I think they meant commensurate there. I am most proudest of my 3.9 for GPA and organized skills. So They are right to be proud of their 3.94 GPA. They are perhaps not right to be proud of their grammar. And so that would certainly need to be edited, and we might refer them to the writing center or any other people, perhaps a roommate. If English isn't their first language, I often encourage our overseas students to find either a classmate or a roommate to have a look at the resume as well. And of course, here are my qualifications for you to overlook. I think they probably meant sort of for you to peruse or for you to take a look. But if you want me to overlook, I'd be happy to. Usually as a hiring manager, you will have dozens, if not scores, if not hundreds of resumes in front of you. So if you can, the more people give you excuses to overlook their materials, the better. I can whittle down my large pile of paper. The last line I put in here is an important one. It's not necessarily as much as a joke. Because number one, personally, I actually don't currently have pets. I did have a pet turtle some years back. And when I was younger, I had a few goldfish. And I do think that they are God's creatures too, cats and turtles and spiders and all sorts of things like that. And I respect people that have animals, and I know that it can mean a huge amount. The death of any animal can mean a huge amount to an individual. At the same time, you want to be a little bit careful, because a reader could say, well, if it really took them 3 months to get over the death of my cat, I don't know. It's good that they explain that sort of gap in their experience, but what if maybe they have other animals at home and I offer them the job to start next week, and then another of their animals gets sick and dies? Are they going to then need several months off? So you want to just be careful how you portray the time. One of the reasons, again, why I think it's really important to put this line in is because, especially for our alumni and others that are perhaps still job seeking, they haven't yet secured a job since graduation. Again, anyone who is in that category listening to this, we invite you to reach out to us. I was speaking to exactly a person like that earlier today, and we're going to be continuing the conversation in the next week or two. So reach out to us at the Career Center. You'll find under the contact information on our website all of the advisors' names and emails and so on. And what I would say is that, sometimes, and especially perhaps for parents that took time off to raise a kid. I have a friend like that, and he's been home since the birth of his second child for a year or two now. And so if he's, putting something in his resume, it is appropriate to explain gaps and just put something simple to explain the gap and say, took 2 years or took 3 years off to raise my children, or something of that nature, to short and brief. And there are things that are very appropriate, that there are times that it is very appropriate, but again, consult with a career advisor, and we're happy to share our wisdom on this for you. Okay, so here we go. Long overdue. I should have put one of these in earlier on. I apologize. One of these cartoons. There's actually quite a number of them out there on the internet, as I found out as I was preparing for this session this evening. This is someone who says, sure, I've had 20 jobs in the past 2 years, but I'm not a job hopper. I never quit any of them voluntarily. This is something she might say at interview, or perhaps maybe she said it to explain all the jobs that she's had and why perhaps she has a 3-page resume in a cover letter. This might imply that, and perhaps does imply, that she's actually been fired from them all. And that's the reason why she had to go hopping from one job to another. There are occasions in our lives where we may have cause to spend short periods of time at various different jobs. Again, we will work with you at the Career Center and guide you in terms of how to explain those periods of time in a way that's most appropriate and would set you up in the best possible light, so that your materials and at interview you can really shine and talk about that without giving any cause for concern to the potential hiring manager. All right, let's look a little bit at interviewing as we come to towards the close of our session. Then my next slide talks about during the actual interview, but we know that there's work to be done before and after the interview. So here's a couple of things when we talk about bloopers, things that could quite easily lose you a job. And sadly, 1 or 2 of these I am guilty of myself and have lost me the job. So I actually speak from experience. Fortunately, I haven't done any of these recently, but certainly if I go back to sort of my college days in terms of applying for an internship or even a job post-college, I may or may I may have been guilty of one or two of these. You can guess perhaps which one. You can put it in the chat if you would like, and maybe we'll do a big reveal later on. But for now, let's dive in. Before the interview, if you haven't prepared, that is bad news. And by preparing, I don't just mean Googling or looking at the website, because if I use a sort of Jewish expression, I'd say like shkoyach, you can Google, you can find information on the website. I would caution, having worked for various companies and having friends who have worked for various companies over the years, that sometimes when you see a very exciting mission statement on their website, in fact, that is what we call, or what I might term, aspirational, meaning the company perhaps right now is really kind of down in the dumps. They're really actually not doing too well, and there's a lot of stress, and there's a lot of who knows what, people, high turnover. There's not sort of much vision or mission, or the people with all the vision are leaving, but they have this very grand mission on the website because they put together a team perhaps, or they brainstormed, and here's where we want to get to, right? This is what our vision is, perhaps this is where we want to be like 5 years from now, and kudos to them, trying to carve out a path, but it may be absolutely no reflection of where they are right now. So you want to be careful that you don't just say, oh, I see your mission is innovation, and I love innovation, and that's all who I am, and in fact I started the Innovation Club at YU, or the Entrepreneur Club at YU, who knows what it is. I would say, just be careful, because they may not have actually innovated anything for the past, who knows, couple of years. Again, it might be something that they aspire to do, but you want to be cautious in terms of how you, sort of what you take from the website, and find out from people that work there, is this actually reflective of where the company is, where they're going? Do your homework. So when you come to the site, you can say, when you come to the interview, you can actually say, well, for speaking to people at your company, I found out that this is such and such is really important to you, and that's actually a really important value to me, and can you tell me a little bit more about that? Or this is why I really want to work for you, and so on. So that's a great way to engage people when you've done your homework. Another piece of homework, directions. I talk about both having directions, if it's obviously a Zoom conversation, you want to have the directions ready, so and backed up. I often use my work email. I have my private email as well. So for me, I guess what I would do is probably just make sure perhaps I had the links saved to both emails. You want to be careful, obviously, if you're working for a company and going on interviews. I would strongly recommend not using your work email. In fact, I know people that have essentially been fired for that, and said, oh, well, we noticed when we did a sort of review of people's technology usage, we noticed that you had some interesting emails where you were sort of reaching out to people about jobs. If you're actually looking for jobs, we want to give you a little bit more time to explore those job opportunities. So pack your bags and pack your boxes, and take all the time you need, because you're no longer employed here. Sadly, I've heard that happen on more than one occasion. So do not use your company email if you are applying. That would be a strong blooper. If you are applying for jobs, use your personal email. And if for some reason, because of your network, someone replies to you through your company email, again, I would strongly advise you to redirect them to your personal email, and ensure that probably you delete or double delete that email if it could potentially compromise you later on. I'm going to, okay. So I think we've talked about, well, you want to have some questions ready for them as well. Find out as much as you can about the company, have some good questions ready for them. You also want to prepare for the unexpected. I won't get that into too much detail. It's probably subject for a whole, interviewing workshop. But what I would say is have a look at yeshiva.biginterview.com. For those students, if you have not yet looked at this, it's a free resource we provide for everybody. We pay actually a lot of money, but to you as students, for our annual subscription, but for you as students, it is free for you. And I would strongly encourage, especially in the COVID era or in the remote interviewing era, Big Interview is an exceptional tool for practicing your interview skills. So make sure to, it has some great modules also just in general, how to prepare, some things on what to say, what not to say, and so on. But it also gives you a chance to practice in front of a camera, to record yourself, to play it back. And it's like, oh, I didn't even realize that I was barely looking at the camera, or do I really say that much in response to a question? So it gives you a really great resource. So again, yeshiva.biginterview.com, very easy to find. Takes 30 seconds to using your YU email to prepare for the to sign into the website, and it's got some exceptional material there. It's even broken down by different disciplines like healthcare and finance, and you can even find very specific interview-related questions depending on your industry. Let's continue. A few more pre-interview no-nos or bloopers. Showing up late or too early. So late is certainly, we've had, unfortunately, a few too many students that have done this, and sometimes for all the best reasons in the world, but they showed up late and they basically lost the interview before they even started it. Sometimes they're lucky, I don't know if you'd even call it lucky, but that the interviewer even accepts them when they arrive late. You don't want to also hang around too early. I remember when I was in Smicha YU, I came very early for a particular Smicha-related internship that I had, and I came so early that they were actually interviewing a whole bunch of people that day. And it was kind of interesting, but I got to see my competition because the person before me was still waiting to go into his interview. And then I saw the person that they were currently interviewing come out. And so these were people who I'm kind of in share with and you know, having class with. And here I get to see them all in the waiting room before I get interviewed. So it was kind of like an interesting setup. I think that one of the other, if I remember correctly, this was about 20 years ago, I think one of the other candidates was perhaps a little bit more spooked or a little bit more sort of stressed out about that than I was. But, you know, for those of you, you know, you don't necessarily want to give yourself or anybody else discomfort. If you end up at the building super early, I would say, you know, it's great to show your eagerness and being early, but 10, 15 minutes is fine. If you want 20 minutes, that works too. Sometimes the elevators in buildings can take a long time. But if you show up somewhere, you're like an hour early, find a Starbucks, find something nearby, sit there for a little while and don't show up like an hour early. Okay, dressing too casually, I think that's, you know, always err on the side of dressing up rather than dressing down. Leaving your phone on, and you may have guessed this is actually one that I did in my interview many years ago, or an interview many years ago. I did not get that offer, and it was a shame because it was something which, you know, was somewhat interesting to me, and I've done a lot of the other work, the homework on the company, spoken to someone at the company, and so on, done a lot of my research, but I happened to be very excited. I just got a brand new phone, and had left it in my coat pocket, which I'd hung up sort of just outside, sort of in the lobby area, or just outside the interview room. And of course I had forgotten to switch my phone off, and I had this very funny, interesting jingle on it that I'd been, you know, all excited about setting on my brand new phone. And clearly I don't even remember who it was, but someone was trying to reach me desperately during the interview, and it went off a few times, and I was just kind of like sinking into my chair, trying to kind of almost disappear because I was so embarrassed at this kind of jingle that was emanating from right outside the interview room. So in any case, just a word to the wise about phones. Afterwards, make sure you put a thank you note. We always mention this because we know that there are people that forget it, even though it's perhaps, again, I think to most of us self-evident, but always send a thank you note afterwards. If you have the opportunity, you might even send like for example, if you were interviewing, let's say for a job tomorrow, and you know that, you know, you could send an email, they're probably not going to look at their emails till after Rosh Hashanah anyway. And you also realize that that might buy you a few days to actually send a real physical thank you note, which very few people get nowadays. You might decide, you know what, it's going to arrive pretty much the same day, right? Monday, Tuesday, whatever. And if you know that they're not making their hiring decision by Monday afternoon, in which case, obviously, if that was the case, you want to send them an email. But if you know that you still have a little bit of time, you may even want to send a sort of traditional physical thank you note, because so few people get that, it makes you more memorable. I just have a few minutes remaining, so let's talk a little bit about during the interview. This is, you know, kind of a little bit extreme, but know that you do get judged on handshakes. And I feel it's really important to have this slide because no one's shaking hands at the moment. So we want to remember that one day in the not too distant future, we hope and pray that we will once again, instead of perhaps shaking elbows or just, I don't know, doing some other form of greeting over the internet, we will once again be having close proximity and handshakes with other people. So just be sure that you are ready for that day. And I could say more about this, but I think picture says 1,000 words. So here we are. A way to lose the interview is by a poor handshake, right? That sets the stage. And if you can't set a good stage and you know, start off with a bang at the beginning of your production, which is your interview, your chance to shine, you essentially have not put your best foot forward, or in this case, your best hand forward. And so please avoid that. If you talk too much or too little, you know, everyone kind of knows themselves. If you tend to clam up, do more interview practice, please. Our doors are open. We've been known to do multiple interviews with different people. Usually we advise you to stick with the same advisor, but sometimes when it comes to interviews, we'll actually say, you know what? I have one approach when it comes to, you know, when I used to hire in the past, I sort of went about hiring this way. There's kind of the questions that I like asking in my own interviews. And I might say, you know what, speak to my colleague Naomi or Sharon and set up some time with them. And they'll give you their take on interviewing as well. And suddenly, we've done that in the past, and feel free to explore that, and we could potentially do that with you too. You don't want to talk negatively about current or past employers or managers. We won't get into sort of the Jewish take or the Lashon Hara, the sort of evil speech or the bad speech of others, which perhaps is you know, a portrayal on us sometimes rather than them, right? It sort of portrays us potentially in a bad light. So without, again, saying more about that, just again, do not speak badly of current or former employers. I have been asked in past interviews, you know, what would you have done differently if you were in that role? So again, you know, you can plan for some of these. You can't plan for every question, but that goes back to our plan for the unexpected. And we can sort of work through with you what an answer to that might look like. You don't want to treat anyone rudely. I put the receptionist here, but you know, no one, not the attendant when you sign in at the building, not the person, I don't know, anyone in the elevator. You know, you want to be really careful because you never know, they could be actually the person who is interviewing you or taking notes of the interview or giving feedback on you. So just be really careful about that. You don't want to do, like, in the interview necessarily ask about benefits, vacation time, right? It's that can come in a conversation once you're offered the job or potentially afterwards, you know, after the interview. I would not bring that up in general during the, and likewise, you know, I wouldn't ask, I would caution around that. Also, not enough, too much eye contact. This kind of goes with talking too much, too little. Know yourself, video yourself, use big interview. And that I think will really help you to discern whether you're using too much or too little eye contact. Failure to match communication styles, right? If the person is very effervescent, the person is interviewing you, very excited or excitable, and you're finding yourself, I don't know, very sort of shy and quiet, maybe that's your personality, just consider in advance how you would respond. How is it, could you match a little bit more of their communication styles, and vice versa. And the last one here, before we go into our final slide or two, is not knowing your why. Right, you really got to know why this company, why me, why am I a good fit for it, right? You really got to be able to answer those questions. You know, they might ask, well, you know, we have 10 other candidates. Why should we choose you? And that's a not an uncommon interview question. So you really got to think about what is it, what ways do you stand out, and how do you convey that throughout the interview and throughout your contact with a company. So final notes very quickly. Proofread, I put ×3, right? Proofread. It's really important. Get others to proofread because we're not always great at proofreading our own. Keep a backup of your resume. Don't lose it. You put a lot of work into your resume. Just make sure you have it to hand. Keep one in the cloud, in Google Docs or whatever cloud-based programs you use. Be ready to share it, meaning obviously have backups in terms of when you, and I said bring quality copies. Don't bring dogged resume copies to the interview. Don't bring even on regular paper, right? You want to stand out, use high quality paper, invest. Staples is open. I'm very grateful to my local Staples. They kept me well stocked throughout our pandemic so far. And it's a great investment to invest in some high grade resume paper. Just ask them if you're not sure which aisle to find it in. And be ready with multiple copies. We've had students that have lost their interviews because they were asked, okay, you know, can you give me a copy of the interview of your resume? For one reason or another, the interviewer either did not have it or maybe looked at it a week previously when they were shortlisting candidates, but didn't have it to hand. And if you don't have a spare copy, you are going to lose that, you know, essentially put yourself at a huge disadvantage. If you're in the Zoom world or the WebEx world or whatever software the company is using to meet with you online, leave it open on a screen, right? Leave the tab open, close everything else. You don't need them to see all your gaming tabs, all your, I don't know, travel tabs, or all your kickboxing tabs. Well, maybe you want to leave that one open. But you know, keep open just the tabs that you really need for the interview, and leave your resume readily available as one of your other tabs. Collect and diversify your mini stories. Have a lot of stories. Don't just go back to the same story again and again, the same example, right? You want to really have different examples from different either projects you engaged in, courses you were in that you had to do team projects on, internships. Don't just go back to the same internship again and again. It can start to sound very stale, or start to sound that you've only ever had one experience in your lifetime. Practice, practice, practice. I should have put a ×3 there. Have a backup computer or phone ready, right? I have my phone by my side. I'm grateful nothing's crashed during our time together. But I do have, my phone available. I even have my laptop fully charged on the side, just in case something happened here and I needed to reconnect in a hurry. I've got it, wired up. I've got it, ready to go. I don't have to start looking for the internet connection and everything else. And so just in case, always good to have a backup whenever you can. Don't skip meals. You want to eat well. Don't have your tummy grumbling, even if they can't hear it on the other end of the internet. You'll hear it and it will disturb you, and you won't perform as well. So just make sure to eat well. Do something that energizes you, right? If it's push-ups, I don't know, if it's meditation, if it's watching a funny video, something that, maybe watching a comedian with a great amount of energy, right? So if you're someone that needs that extra bout of energy. So that's my last tip. Don't be too lethargic, especially like me. I've been speaking now for exactly an hour. I'm going to let you all go in just 2 minutes. But I really, you want to recognize that you don't just need that energy at the beginning of the interview. You need it throughout. So whether it's a half-hour interview or an hour, you need to keep up that energy. So this is it, my final slides. If there are any questions, again, I'm going to stop the recording in just about 60 seconds, and then I can stay on if there are particular questions. But I wanted all of you to know that you can always reach out to any of the advisors. I mentioned yeshiva.biginterview.com for those that are currently enrolled in YU, both graduate and undergraduates. You can join our LinkedIn page, whether you are a friend of YU, whether you're enrolled, whether you're not enrolled. We are more than happy. We've recently revamped this page. It is monitored several times a week, and we like to post several times a week as well. New and interesting information, sometimes even some funny memes or things to get you thinking. I might put some of the cartoons from today's presentation into our LinkedIn page, but really we welcome you. We have over 1,000 people in the group right now, and it's growing every week, so we welcome you to that. I showed you our Canvas page before for those that are current students. This is how you're going to see this webinar and all of our webinars. You can just go onto YouTube, just Google YouTube Yeshiva University, or type in this. You will find our whole almost every webinar we've done since the COVID era, and perhaps some from even before that, are online. So you're welcome to watch at your leisure and review sessions as well. This is obviously our website. This is our email. This is my email. You can reach out to myself or any of the advisors. I want to wish each and every one of you a great, great blessing, especially to those that are celebrating the upcoming Jewish New Year. It should be a sweet and sweeter New Year. It's been pointed out many times that perhaps there's no coincidence. The Jewish year begins, perhaps as people of the book, the Jewish year also begins the beginning, certainly for our hemisphere, or most of our hemisphere begins the beginning of the new school year as well, or more or less within a couple of weeks. I wish you every success in your books and your academics as you explore both, whether it's Jewish books, whatever the text is, to get excited about those, to engage your professors in those, to engage us at the Career Center with your strategy and thinking about what your future holds. And again, whether you're celebrating or not this weekend, and just at the beginning of this new academic year and at the beginning of this new Jewish year, I wish you all a Shana Tova, Ketiva v'Chatima Tova, a really special and sweet and exciting and engaging year ahead. And thank you all so much. I will switch this recording off, and we are going to take, if there are any questions, you are welcome to ask, and I will answer those. Let me just end the recording.